case study of May-June 2016, variant 3. Airport expansion. In 2014, a proposal by Heathrow Airport Authority in London recommended building an extra runway at Heathrow, which is one of the world's busiest airports. Ha acknowledged that it was an initial proposal that needed more detailed work. Oh, is this about externalities? Yeah, I think so. I think cost benefit analysis the pura aega. Nice, nice. They claim that if built, the runaway would deliver greater economic benefits and be a better option for economic growth for the UK than any other proposal for new airport capacity. Uh, HAA was not able to quantify the benefits with any precision, but they said they would range from 50 billion to 156 billion pounds. So yeah, so that's your estimated benefit, and you have a lot of figures. The majority would benefit the wider economy. It would create jobs, it would encourage trade, increase consumption, and improve public finances because obviously tax revenue and all should increase. The proposal would allow the airports to be connected to more emerging markets. So, those markets that are making the transition from a developing country to a developed economy, namely China and India, and enable 40 new destinations to be served directly, including some in India and China. Cargo volumes would double and UK competitiveness would increase. So, trade competitiveness, that's nice. They added that more efficient vehicles, an increased proportion of passengers traveling by public transport, and new aircraft technology would mean that the extra flights would not exceed the European Union pollution limits. And why wouldn't they do so? Because technology would probably cut back on emissions, and because I believe simultaneously people, I don't know how this is linked to this, but maybe people are generally using public transport more, so that gives you a greater uh, leeway to play around with them, and you can hence go with that. In order to build the new runway, major motorways would need to be altered. Ooh, so yeah, many homes would have to be demolished, but the airport said that they would pay the owners 25% above the property's market value. When it was built, car drivers wishing to take passengers to the airport would have to pay a congestion charge. So yeah, so homes will be demolished. That's a problem. When it was built, car drivers wishing to take passengers to the airport would have to pay a congestion charge. So unse bhi paise lenge. Those opposing the new runway said that thousands of people would be forced out of their homes and communities would be destroyed. And while waiting for a decision to be made, they would be unable to sell their homes. So that's also important because until they make a decision, the demand for that particular property is going to be very low. Because like who wants to buy a property not knowing whether or not it will be around in like the next 2 to 3 years? Because जब तक decision नहीं होगा तब तक वो बेच भी नहीं पाएंगे, at least at a decent price. And yeah, airport noise bhi hoga, which is actually pretty annoying. Say, and this is the cost of the airport to build, with the government paying 1.2 billion pounds towards motorway alterations as well. There were alternative proposals. The first was to build a completely new airport to the east of Heathrow. So that's your first alternative proposal. The second was to add another runway to an existing airport, Gatwick, to the south of Heathrow. So existing runway, you can do that. This HAA argued that a completely new airport would take much longer to build, okay, and be more expensive than an extra runway, and would mean higher fares for passengers. The owners of Gatwick Airport insisted that the new runway at Heathrow was not in the best interest of passengers, and that Gatwick would be better able to offer lower fares and connect emerging markets. Say, with longer range aircraft, they said that their plans were cheaper, approximately this much, and could be built quicker than the Heathrow option with less disruption to motorways. Noise from another runway at Gatwick would also affect fewer people. Okay, so you're just messing around with 14,000 people. Not that big of an issue. But that was a long case study. वैसे पढ़ते ही बड़े हो गए. सही है. So H ये जो Heathrow वाले boys हैं, and they said that the new runway would benefit the wider economy. Explain why this claim might be justified. Okay, so you can really use the case here, and let me open a slide to write on that. Okay, so we just have to give a one-sided answer. Why this is justified? Basically, you're just explaining how, like, more of explaining how this new runway could benefit the wider economy. And you have a lot of stuff just in the case which you can take help from. So, like, literally, either like wider economy word to word diya hua hai. So you can talk about how it would create jobs, encourage trade, boost spending, improve public finances. Okay, so इस चीज को थोड़ा सा अपने words में आप करके elaborate कर दें. For 4 marks, it shouldn't be that big of an issue. So like very short, you just have to answer how. So like, it said कि jobs होगा तो employment increases, which should mean that that wages, plus income, standard of living goes up of these. So that's a benefit. That's how it affects the wider economy. Sahi, it boosts spending. Okay, so spending zyada hai, consumption zyada hai, sahi, which should increase your aggregate demand and national income. It won't have a multiplied effect because it's an induced variable rather than an autonomous one. You need autonomous injections to increase national income. So government expenditure, investment, export expenditure, stuff like that helps. However, this leads to our second point about how it can improve public finances because your tax revenue would go up, and you can literally be as concise as we're being here because it's just 4 marks. So tax revenue improves, which is helpful. And since you're connected to more emerging markets, since your cargo volumes double, your basically what's happening if your cargo volumes are doubling and all of that type of stuff, your transport costs should go down, making your exports more competitive because of that, the price at which you can actually export and deliver your exports decreases. So given that, they're elastic, because obviously it doesn't help you if your exports are inelastic. So, while talking about exports, ek line mein bata de karo. Given that they're elastic, your export revenue would increase, which has a positive effect on your balance of payment, namely your current account. This is also an autonomous injection. So it has a multiplied effect on your national income, multiplied increase on national income. So, and I think that's more than enough. It's just 4 marks, so you have to be a little careful not to overwrite. Do you guys think we can check the marking scheme?
If the question में कुछ और तो नहीं बताना कि like using कुछ अपना भी और we can talk about how this will encourage more investment और ज़्यादा growth हो सकती है और
said that the new runway would benefit the wider economy. Explain why this claim might be justified. So they haven't really said anything that would indicate that they want more or they want us to purely use our own knowledge. Otherwise, Sherry is right. We could have talked about investment and stuff of that sort. There's just a lot of things you can talk about. But let's see how we did. So runaway would benefit more than just those who use it. So that's the idea behind the wider economy. Increase spending, trade, jobs, how they might occur. So they just want you to take 1 or 2 of these things and just explain them. So, and the idea again, and that's why the factors we talked about, they weren't we could have simply said, okay, it benefits people, the passengers who are traveling, but that's not what the question was. It was about the wider economy, and they had given us a lot of cues in the passage. So we just went on from there, and I think we're fine. Part A में तो at least रोना नहीं आएगा. Normally part D is really bad, but care. So part D, explain why dropping off passengers could be classified as an externality and suggest one method of addressing this externality. Well, for a second I thought पता नहीं क्या passengers को plane से drop off करे.
नहीं, I think talk
Yeah.
about transport.
Yeah. So basically, आप जब अम्मी अब्बू के साथ जाते हैं गाड़ी में to drop your popo to the airport, because for some godforsaken reason the entire family has to go to drop that one person, although you can just very well say khudafis at home. So when you do weird stuff, but the idea is when you drop off your people at the airport, you have to explain how that can be classified as an externality, and you have to suggest one method of addressing this externality. So very well, like it could very well be a 2-2 split. You, for 2 marks, you just explain how that's classified as an externality. Again, it's just 4 marks, so you don't need to like really. I mean, you to be on the safe side, you could add a one-line explanation for what an externality is, like just as literally as simple as externality, negative externalities in this case, how that basically costs to the third party basically. Just a one-liner because it's just 4 marks. But the first part of this question is how this can be classified as an externality. And boys, क्या होता है जब गाड़ी में हम जाते हैं, क्या नुकसान है?
कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड emissions.
ब्रो केमिस्ट्री का पेपर नहीं चल रहा, वो पहले हो चुका होगा अब तक. क्लैश होगा उसमें.
Air pollution, congestion, traffic pollution.
So there's pollution because you're using some sort of transportation medium, a vehicle, right? So like air pollution, you can also talk about noise pollution. The second thing is about congestion, because obviously if that becomes a popular route, there's like, because traffic ज़्यादा है उधर, because people are coming to drop people off, it basically rush रहते होते, which leads to time delays and all of that type of stuff. If you wanted to be, I believe this is in the context of what we're saying, it's a consumption on consumption wali externality. What do you guys say? So like idea is the consumption of a service is leading to, it's leading to external costs for other people who are just trying to consume. But yeah, it's not very clear in this particular case, because depends who the traffic affects basically. So if it's like a firm transporting, then it could be a consumption on production externality because it increases their transportation costs. However, for 2 marks, you just explain how this is basically, this is affecting people external to those who are actually undergoing or who are actually using this service, who are actually using their cars. This is going to affect other people on the road, and because of that, because those people aren't using your car yet, by your car or by you using the airport and using your car to get there, they're being negatively affected. So you've shown how this can be classified as an externality. You have to suggest a way that you can, so this would be roughly around 2 marks because it's a 4-mark question, and then you have to suggest one method of addressing this externality. I believe they have one in the passage. If you want to take help from that, was that you क्या था? Car drivers pay a congestion charge, and what that does is it is an attempt to internalize that externality. So the idea there becomes that if car drivers have to pay a congestion charge, then you'd be less likely to bring many cars, or you'd be more likely to take public transport if that is available. or even if you इतनी ही number of गाड़ियाँ आती हैं, at least they pay that additional charge, which in an ideal case is put back into trying to neglect that, into trying to help solve that externality through stuff like trying to deal with pollution and so on. That you can take reference to that, or we could just go with some other idea if you guys have any.
We could subsidize public transport if that makes it cheaper for people to use.
Okay, so we can subsidize public transport and do so. Uh, and in particular, and suggest one method of addressing this externality. So we could go with that. So we could, subsidize. Well, excuse that. So you could subsidize public transport. And what that does is, चलो bus फिर भी आएगी तो थोड़ा सा congestion हो जाएगा, but it'll be much less than what would happen if all those people came in cars. You could also subsidize more, I don't know what do you call them, eco-friendly vehicles. So you take those PSs, subsidize them. So here the idea here is that congestion should go down.
I would also add के साथ थोड़ी सी नष्ट theory. I don't know. I just want to add it here. Just encourage tell them कि नहीं यार ऐसे करो, go use it ताकि externalities ना हो. Encouraging people by information. कि हाँ ये करो अच्छा है.
Okay, and I wouldn't say I wouldn't recommend you add it here because just about time constraints. But I would say that could potentially be a completely different suggestion to solve it. That instead of subsidizing, you basically use nudge theory, which is basically positive reinforcement. So, an example in this case, instead of forcing people or making it cheaper for people to go by public transport, you just hand out leaflets or improve information and explain to them why it's important to go by public transport, or why it's important, or the benefits about having eco-friendly vehicles. Obviously, let's say in this case, the idea here is so that was nudge theory, positive reinforcement. The behavioral economist in Shahryar came out. But here the idea is with subsidization, you make them cheaper. So obviously price kam hoti hai, so people use them more. They use public transport more, which cuts back on coming by car and that type of stuff. चलो I think यार इसमें तो full marks यार. देखो definition, 2 comment, 2 example, ये हमने तो यही तो चीज लिखी थी. क्या बोले यार. Wait. So the idea of an externality affecting third parties was clearly explained, with most candidates giving the example of traffic congestion. So I guess we are like most candidates, and that's fine because they've also talked about the definition here. So yeah, do at the very least give a one-liner. It's a little confusing, like when it's required, when it isn't. But एक line देने में कोई हर्ज नहीं है. Okay, so going on to part C, airport infrastructure is privately owned and makes money for its owners. जो बात है, that's the idea behind private ownership. And private firms in general, their profit motivate, they have their profit motive, and that's all they theoretically care about. Consider why in this case the government would pay 1.2 billion towards the cost of motorway alterations. Okay, why? So you have to consider why in this case the government would pay this much towards the cost of motorway alterations. Because the private firm won't.
Basically, I feel like it's because the government would want to subsidize this industry so that जो private producers हैं वो price बढ़ा के अपनी cost cover ना करें, तो जो लोगों को actually airport की facilities use करनी है उन्हें और ज़्यादा high prices ना pay करनी पड़े.
Okay, so that could be one option. Because you have to basically consider, so you're going to give reasons why they would pay. But if we quickly refer back to the case as to what exactly where exactly they're referring to motorway alterations. So yeah, to build the new runway, major motorways would need to be altered. Uh, Say it. Okay. So yeah, so we can go on. And was it the question that's bugging me is like, would the airport necessarily have to pay, like, or would they? Well, they wouldn't want to, but can they get away without paying for these alterations? If so, then the government.
Because the whole aim is of the government, right? Because the private producers, they're already like getting so much profit, so they why would they care about the economy growing?
So okay, so you start off, you just give a one-liner about the private sector. You know, theoretically, their sole, but I mean, maybe in real life they're not. Well, yeah, they're still pretty bad. Well, in real life it could vary, but theoretically, which is what your paper is going to be about theory, their sole motive is profit maximization. So like बाकी सब लोग गए, you know, बाहर में. Um, for them, would only care about their own costs, right? So reasons why the government would want to pay. So we have Bilal's reason, but we can start out with something about how. So Bilal, does this make sense to you? How the private sector wouldn't pay for motorway alterations?
Yeah.
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 So because private sector won't, like, they only look at, you know, only look at the costs that affect them. So the idea here is, and that is why basically they have their own private sector appraisal techniques. um, and the cost that we're talking about here, excuse the handwriting, uh, you know, is the basically the cost of, like, let's say motorways being destroyed, um, being removed कर लेते हैं जिधर, wherever you're going to make that particular airport new track, you have to remove some motorways. So the cost associated with that is basically um, to the users of the motorway, and those users are not the airport. In fact, a lot of the time they may not even be those who are actually using the service that the airport is providing. So hence, this is an external cost, and obviously external costs do not, private sector does not even account for them. uh, उनकी अपनी जो appraisal techniques होती हैं उसमें include भी नहीं होता. However, the government does account for this, like in their cost benefit analysis, and basically they do try to minimize negative externalities, and in doing so, like, you know, they would pay in order to try to minimize how do you spell minimize? Minimize negative externalities, because it's the government, because governments still care about, you know, societal benefit and stuff like that. The private sector does not. And it's 5 marks, so like if you explain this really well, you could get a lot of those marks, but we can still write about Bilal's point about how the second thing, how the government, well, in fact, if we phrase it a little better, if even if the airport or the private sector did do so, you know, like if private sector, which is basically your airport in this case, if this does pay, even what happens then, it increases their costs, which they transfer on to the consumer, they restrict supply and so on, and what happens is the prices increase. The government may not want that to happen. So this could be in a form of a, well, it's a subsidy might be a little incorrect word to use. Could be a form in order to some basically they're trying to keep airport costs low. That cost low. So this would be a tertiary, like a secondary point, because the main thing is about the idea about how the private sector doesn't care, but someone has to care, and the government does care about external costs. So you have to show how it's an external cost, and because it's an external cost, the government would want to try to tackle that by paying for alterations, just to ensure that those alterations are done. Do you think this is fine?
Yeah, it's more than enough. 5 marks के लिए तो बहुत ज़्यादा है.
Okay. Motorway is used by people other, again here's the important thing, other than those who use airports. That's important, because that's how you show how it's external. So that's really your third party. Government involved in large road projects. Okay, long-term investment. Okay, so that's the government also cares about in getting involved in like road projects. So we could have written about how it doesn't, how it's a more macro effect as well. It's not just about, okay, log ko masla hoga. Good investment is just a good infrastructure leads to better investment. So it's a good long-term investment for them, if you ensure general transport infrastructure. So yeah, so we did. Okay, I think we slightly slid off the theme of this question. So our initial point was fine about how, what do you say, because it's an external cost, because it's used by other people as well, the government wants to get involved. But you could also just write about the pure benefits of getting involved and having and paying and improving your infrastructure. These are just the benefits, like encouraging economic growth and all. These are just the benefits of having improved infrastructure. So that was something that we could have mentioned, that in fact we should have mentioned. And consideration of social factors is just like, you can talk about that. It's basically, better connectivity through better infrastructure, and how you eliminate social exclusion and stuff of that sort. Okay, so this was not as easy for people. So candidates could have suggested that the motorway is used by people other than who use the airport, and that the government is usually involved in large road projects because of the long-term nature of the investment, and because of the general benefits, economic growth and so on. So you could do so, right? And we have part D. Okay, so part D, you have to consider whether the information in the proposal by your Heathrow's authority was mainly factual or was mainly factual evidence. Was it this, or was it, was it an opinion? And comment on whether you support the proposal. So you have to do two things. First, you refer to the passage and see कि ये factual था या ज़्यादातर opinionated stuff, opinionated arguments थी, and then you comment whether you would support the proposal. So those are the two things you have to do. उन्होंने क्या क्या बोला? They weren't able to quantify the benefits, but they said it would range by this, and it was an estimate, and it would create jobs, encouraging trade, and it would do all of this, and it would allow the airport to be connected to emerging markets. Added that that this would not exceed European air pollution limits. So basically, इधर को ही हमें stick करना है. So if we quickly look at, if we quickly take a slide. So again, this is slightly different from your positive and normative statements, because those were still, positive statements are not just exclusive to facts. Those are like still more of, whether or not it can be predicted or falsified by economic analysis, which makes this slightly different. So I guess we just start off with classifying which one was a fact, which one was like more of an opinion. So And I think the way you define facts is that those that can be objectively proven. And वैसे तो something that is definitely a fact is like how this would allow the airport to be connected to more markets, to more emerging markets. It would like enable 40 new destinations to be served directly. Like वो
Jobs
तो
का
yeah.
jobs का भी होगा fact. तभी तो इसको मैं देख रहा हूँ.
Uh, okay, so 40 new locations and all, emerging markets. Jobs ही बिलाल बोल रहा है because obviously you would employ more people. So jobs and all, uh, those are a few of the things that are facts. I would be hesitant to call their figures, their estimations facts वैसे, because they could not quantify the benefits with any precision, but they were giving andaza. They were like literally estimating. So can we say that this estimation?
No, it's not a fact.
Yeah. So like their estimated figures, and while writing your answer, do like actually quote the figures, but the estimated figures.
Also, they didn't provide evidence के exceed नहीं होगा pollution limits.
Whether or not it would exceed the pollution limit. And because again, pollution limit में भी क्या बोल रहे हैं कि यार हाँ टेक्नोलॉजी बेहतर है हमारे पास, एंड दूसरे लोग भी पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट यूज कर लेंगे, तो लाइक इट्स ऑल वेरी लाइक iffy. Encouraging trade, boosting spending, well, that's interesting as well. Whether normally jobs do boost spending, it's a little difficult to tell objectively. Whether it would increase public finances is another question. So this particular
cargo volumes would double.
Okay, so cargo volumes would definitely double. That's like a fact. I think in some stuff that's not facts, stuff like public finances ko better karega. It again depends. It depends on stuff like how much those people actually go on to consume, even if they do have higher wages. How much of that is taxed? How much of that is paid in tax? Bringing stuff like the Laffer curve into question. I don't think हमें हर चीज को classify करना है. 7 मार्क का है तो इसके लिए कुछ marks मिल जाएंगे. Consider whether the information in the proposal by the HAA was mainly factual. And इसमें तो at least इसकी तो जरा एक deduction डाल दो. I would say it was mainly क्या कहते हैं? Yeah, so it was mainly opinion based. And so mainly opinionated, or opinion based would be a better word maybe. And understand, it's not just the number of things we classified. The more important figures, like more important stuff, like whether or not it would exceed the pollution levels that you have to abide by, about public finances, about the actual figures that about of benefits and costs, stuff that is way more important than okay cargo volume double ho jayega and chalo 40 link aage.
And talk about the fact that even the facts that they provided, they didn't provide statistical evidence for it. They said cargo volumes would double, but like, what do you mean cargo volumes would double?
Okay, so well, no backing both सकते हैं आप. And because especially in cases of estimated figures, like if another agency, especially if it's a public agency, if they go and they carry out the particular estimation, they could get a very different figure. Like you could even write that with estimated figures, अगर चलो आज HAA ने किया है, कल मैं कोई public agency भेज दूं, that would not carry out the private sector appraisal. That would in fact carry out a proper cost benefit analysis, because the very metric to judge what exactly is a benefit or what exactly is a cost is different. So because of that, estimated figures could vary depending on who's carrying out the investigation. depending on who is estimating, basically. So if it's varying, then obviously it's not this set in stone thing. So the next thing we have to do in this particular question is comment on whether you would support the proposal. So
तुमने reasons दे ही दिए ना, like these are the reasons why you wouldn't support this.
Yeah, so basically the comment is just is an extension to this. You basically elaborate, would you support it, why would you if you would support it, why would you support it, if not, then so on. Yeah, I would like, I guess you can say, I guess you would say something of like, depends on evaluation technique. If you're using private sector appraisal, then yes, you would support the proposal because that's all you care about: private cost, private benefit. However, if you're using cost benefit analysis, which is more comprehensive and it is what the government would use, which is what we personally would also prefer to use, then because let's say your external costs are great and they're also localized and they're mainly short term as well, and because benefits, let's say any external benefit you get, they are long run, like long term,